Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. Really quick, before we jump into today's episode, I just want to tell you about an exciting event that's coming up this weekend with Memory's Journey. Memory's Journey is a 12-hour Commander stream dedicated to raising money to support Alzheimer's research. As you might be aware, Alzheimer's is a disease that has impacted many families out there, including my own. So a huge thank you to Command the Cause, Commander-at-Arms, Deck Tuner, and Monarch for putting this together. 13 guests, including myself, are going to be joining this stream to help support this awesome cause. So make sure you tune into the stream on this Saturday, October 2nd. The stream starts at 11 a.m. Eastern Time and goes all the way to 11 p.m. Eastern Time, and it's going to include some of your favorite Magic content creators and Magic personalities. I'll be joining the stream to play a game of Commander at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time with Zach and Cal from Playing with Power and our host Jake. So make sure you check out that game and all the other ones in the entire event schedule you can find in the description below. Thank you in advance for joining us and supporting this awesome cause. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So on today's episode, I've got a deck tech for you that, well, is just a little bit out there. Because as you probably noticed from the title and the thumbnail of this episode, this deck has 99 lands in it. That's right, outside of the Commander, every single card in this deck is a land. Now you might want to ask me, Mitch, why did you build a deck that's 99 lands? And I would ask you the question, why not? In a format like Commander, some incredibly crazy things can happen and you can still build an effective deck even with all lands. You can definitely win games of Commander with this deck, and actually you've got multiple avenues to victory. So what exactly is this deck? What does it want to do? And what is the Commander for it? Well, let's jump into it to find out. So the Commander for this deck is the Cosmic Space Baby, because yes, that's a thing in Magic, Child of Alara. When building this deck, I wanted access to absolutely every single land I possibly could have. And actually, like many other decks, this one's built the restriction that every single card in this deck outside of the Commander has to be less than $1. So a 5-color Commander like Child of Alara definitely makes sense. And Child of Alara especially makes sense because, well, let's read the card. It's a 6/6 Avatar with Trample that costs Wooburg, and it says, when Child of Alara dies, destroy all non-land permanents, they can't be regenerated. Or at least I should say that's what its Oracle text reads. Now a quick note, and something that definitely helped Child of Alara and other commanders with death triggers, back in I believe June of last year, they updated the death trigger rule. Essentially, death triggers work for commanders even if you're putting your commander back in the command zone when they die. Obviously, this is huge for Child of Alara, especially a Child of Alara deck built with 99 lands. Because, yeah, if that rule change didn't happen and that wasn't the case, well, we'd have to just, let Child of Alara hit our graveyard and then hope we can find ways to get it back. But since when Child of Alara dies, we get it back in our command zone, we're going to be just fine. And yeah, Child of Alara's death trigger is incredibly powerful and devastating to our opponents. Again, not really devastating to us at all because, yeah, we're not running any non-land permanents. But chances are incredibly likely that our opponents aren't going to have 99 lands in their deck like we are because, yeah, that's a pretty off-the-wall strategy that really, you don't really see too much, or at all, or ever. I've never seen it. Regardless, Child of Alara is the perfect piece that can help us control the board while we just, keep playing lands. And since we are guaranteed to keep hitting lands off the top, we can essentially ensure that we're getting Child of Alara out essentially whenever we need to. I mean, yes, Commander tax is a thing and that's going to build up, but we keep hitting lands off the top, so we're at least going to be able to pay for one of that Commander tax every single turn. Or I guess I should say, one of the additional built-up Commander tax. So essentially, in practice, we can just keep demolishing the board every other turn with this Commander, because again, we are guaranteed to hit lands off the top. And actually, we've got some lands that can help us ensure that we get that death trigger exactly when we want it. So essentially, when we're set up correctly, we can hold the board hostage and say, you know what? If you don't do what I want you to do, I'm just going to destroy everything right now. Who knew that the Space Cosmo Baby had such power in a 99 lands deck? So now let's move on and talk about those lands that can really help this deck pack a punch. First up, let's talk about the Golden Pig, which is the #1 card out of our 99. And the Golden Pig of this deck is High Market. High Market is a very simple land. It's going to tap for a colorless, or we can tap and sacrifice a creature to gain 1 life. Yeah, this land essentially does exactly what we want to do. We want to be able to sacrifice our commander whenever we want, so this land is pretty perfect for that. Essentially, this is a free, repeatable sacrifice outlet for us. Okay, I guess when I say free, yeah, there is no cost for that activation, but you do have to tap the land, so it's kind of like you're losing a mana on it, so maybe like a 1 mana sacrifice outlet. Regardless, this card is fantastic. Again, with this and Child of Alara on the board, we can easily hold the board hostage. Our opponents are going to be hesitant to put anything on the board because we can essentially at any point just say, you know what, I don't like the way things are looking here, so I'll just tap this, sacrifice my commander, gain a life, which is just nice, but most importantly, destroy the board. So yeah, in combination with our commander, this card can be incredibly effective and pretty brutal as well. We're going to set our opponents back a ton and basically not set ourselves back at all. So yeah, this card is incredibly efficient and effective, and that's what makes it the Golden Pig. Next up, we've got some more land sacrifice outlets with Grim Backwoods and Sheldon Acropolis. Grim Backwoods has pay 2 black and green, tap, sacrifice a creature, draw a card. And of course, drawing a card is never a bad thing. Now again, even though this does cost 4 mana, okay, or again, technically 5 because you're actually tapping this land and losing out on its mana, that's still going to be well worth it. And in most scenarios, again, we're going to have to wait a turn to sacrifice our commander again anyways because, well, we've got to recast our commander over and over again, so it's going to be fine. I mean, our opponents are going to have a really hard time refilling the board when we can just destroy the entire board every other turn. So we're also going to be utilizing Sheldon Acropolis, which has pay 4 and a red, tap, sacrifice a creature. It's going to deal 2 damage to our creature or player. So we get some nice additional value of being able to ping one of our opponents in the face. And speaking of additional value, let's talk about Great Hall of Starnheim and Lit Jar of Mirror Lake. Each of these are going to enter the battlefield tapped. Great Hall taps for a black, and Lit Jar of Mirror Lake taps for a blue. Regardless, Great Hall of Starnheim has pay white, white, and a black, and tap and sacrifice it in a creature you control. Create a 4/4 Angel Warrior creature token with flying and vigilance. Activates ability only time you cast a sorcery. So we do lose the land, but again, sacrificing our commander is exactly what we want to do, and we're getting an angel, so that's not that bad. And obviously, we're going to be able to get through with some damage from that angel because our opponents, well, won't have any blockers left. And then let Jar Mirror Lake cast pay 2 green, green, blue, and tap and sacrifice it to create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it enters the battlefield with additional +1 counter on it. Activate this only time you cast a sorcery. So in a roundabout way, this can also help us demolish our commander to demolish the entire board. Again, since our commander is legendary, that legend rule will apply, and it really doesn't matter which one we sacrifice again to the legend rule because, well, either one is going to destroy the board when they die. Regardless, next up we've got some other cards that can help us out. And these cards are MDFC lands, and yes, in my opinion, they technically count, okay? On the backside, you can play them as a land that enters the battlefield tapped and taps for 1 color, so yeah, they're lands, okay? Regardless, the first one that I want to bring up is Kazul's Fury. It has essential cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature. It's going to deal damage equal to the sacrifice creature's power to any target. So yeah, we can sack our commander at instant speed and ping something for 6. Again, most likely an opponent's face. And then Song Mad Treachery helps us out in a different way. It says gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature, gains haste until end of turn. So we can threaten opponent's creature with this, or again, just utilize it as a land. Next up, we've got some green MDFCs that can help us out as well with Colony Ambush, Tangled Florahedron, and Vastwood Fortification. Colony Ambush says target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. So if an opponent has a creature that's got 6 or more power, well, our commander's gonna lose that fight, and that's okay. Because again, by our commander dying, we pretty much win the fight in the end by just destroying everything. And then Tangled Florahedron is a mana dork that taps for a green, so it can get us off to a quicker start. And then Vastwood Fortification just says put a +1 counter on target creature. Our commander does have 6 power to start, so by increasing its power by just 1, it's going to be a 7/7, and which is essentially a 3-shot kill in commander. And commander damage is most definitely a way that we can win with this deck after we've decimated our opponent's things over and over and over again. Next up, let's move on to some black MDFCs with Hagra Mauling and Zoff Consumption. Hagra Mauling is actually going to cost 1 less if an opponent has no basics and just destroy target creature. Obviously with this, we can take out an opponent's creature, but most of the time we're probably just going to use it to take out our own. Because again, essentially by taking out our commander, we take out everything else. And then Zoff Consumption is going to drain all of our opponents for 4, and we gain 4 life. But now let's move on to the blue MDFCs with Bayan Veil and Jawari Disruption. Bayan Veil can help us from an attack from our opponents. It says creatures your opponents control get -2/-0 until end of turn. And then Jawari Disruption can be a surprising counterspell out of nowhere. It's going to counter target spell 6 control pays 1. Finally though, in white we've got a sorcery that's basically our commander with Onto Inversion. It simply says destroy all non-land permanents. So with this in our hand, we can give Child of Alara a break and just, blow up the board with this. But after we've wiped things away and clear the board, it's going to open up things for some of our other lands. So let's talk about some creature lands, starting off with Lava Claw Reaches, Needle Spires, and Lumbering Falls. Each of these are going to enter the battlefield tapped and tap for one of two colors. Lava Cloud Reaches has pay 1 black red until end of turn. It becomes a 2/2 black and red elemental creature with pay X. This creature gets +X + 0 until end of turn. It's still a land. Yeah, this thing can dish out a lot of damage with this kind of a deck. After we've wiped the board clean, our land creatures can get through and Lava Cloud Reaches can pack quite a punch. And then Needle Spires has pay 2 red white and it becomes a 2/1 with double strike until end of turn. And actually, including cards like Vastwood Fortification, we've got other ways to pump these creatures. So Needle Spires can hit quite hard at a certain point. Next up, there's Lumbering Falls, which by paying 2 green-blue, it's a 3/3 with Hexproof until end of turn. But let's move on to some more land creatures with Shambling Vent, Wandering Fumarole, and Stirring Wildwood. Shambling Vent becomes a 2/3 with Lifelink, Wandering Fumarole becomes a 1/4 that we can switch its power and toughness until end of turn, and Stirring Wildwood becomes a 3/4 with Reach. Regardless, all these land creatures can help us chip away at our opponent's life totals as we continue to control the board. Next up, we've got Fairy Conclave and Treetop Village, each of which enters the battlefield tapped and tap for 1 color. Fairy Conclave can become a 2/1 with Flying, and Treetop Village can become a 3/3 with Trample. And then we've got some colorless lands that can upside as well with Crawling Barrens, Dread Statuary, and Mishra's Factory. Crawling Barrens has pay 4, put 2/+1 counters on it, then you may have become a 0/0 elemental creature until end of turn. It's still a land. So with this one, we can actually build its power throughout the game, and this thing can end up hitting really hard. And then Dread Statuary can become a 4/2, and Mishra's Factory can become a 2/2. Finally, we do have some lands that can actually make us creature tokens with Karakeep and Vitu-Ghazi the City Tree. Karakeep's going to make 0/1 kobolds, and Vitu-Ghazi's going to make 1/1 saprolings. Regardless, these can be fantastic chump blockers that can really help us stall until we're ready to sacrifice our commander again. But outside of winning with creatures or winning with commander damage, let's talk about another fantastic way for this deck to win. And that would actually be with a land itself with Maze's End. Maze's End is going to enter the battlefield tapped and it can tap for a colorless, and by paying 3 and tapping it, we can bounce it back to our hand. When we do that, we search our library for a gate card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle our library. If we control 10 or more gates with different names, we win the game. So if we can repeatedly do this over and over and over again and get those 10 gates into play, well, we're gonna win. Again, if we can control the board long enough, this is definitely doable. So of course, we're going to be utilizing all 10 guild gates that we can with Izzet Guild Gate, Rakdos, Boros, Simic, Azorius, Golgari, Orzhov, Dimir, Gruul, and Selesnya. Each of them come into the battlefield tapped and tap for 1 of 2 colors. And actually, there is an 11th gate out there that can really help us out with Gateway Plaza. It enters the battlefield tapped, and when it comes into play, we have to sacrifice it unless we pay 1, but it can tap for 1 mana of any color. Yeah, for a 5-color commander, this can really help us out. Yes, it is slightly slower, but we're not really looking to play basically anything until we get our commander out. So if we have this early, we can just get this into play, pay the 1, and then it's just basically a command tower for us. And actually, after we fixed our mana and can get our commander out, we really don't need to actually play lands like these that are just slower. Again, we are guaranteed to draw land after land after land after land, so we're going to have options on what to put in play. And again, after we have Wooburg for our commander, we don't really need basically any more mana fixing because commander tax is just whatever we want. Regardless, again, obviously this helps us out being a gate and being able to help us fix our mana early in the game. For those same reasons, well, except for them not being gates, we're also going to be utilizing Rupture, Spire, Transguild Promenade, and Archway Commons, each which do the exact same thing. And of course, we're also going to be utilizing some other cards that can really help us with mana fixing with Command Tower, Exotic Orchard, and Unclaimed Territory. Command Tower can tap for any of our colors, Exotic Orchard can tap for any color that a land opponent controls could produce, so most of the time it's going to be able to help us out a lot, and Unclaimed Territory can essentially, well, tap for any color as long as we choose Avatar. When it comes into play, we choose a creature type. We can tap for a color, so we can tap to add 1 mana of any color, but spend this mana only to cast a creature spell of the chosen type. So again, our commander is an Avatar, so there you go. Next up, there's Path of Ancestry, which comes into play tapped, can tap for any of our colors, and when we use it to cast our commander, well, we get to scry 1. Next up, we also have some lands with some other benefits with Opal Palace and Guildmage's Forum. Opal Palace has pay 1 and tap to add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity, and if you spend to cast your commander, it enters the battlefield with a number of additional counters on it equal to the number of times you've cast from the command zone this game. So yeah, this can make our commander into an absolutely dominant force with the more and more times that we cast it. Again, when we get our commander up to a 7/7 with just 1 counter on it, it's going to be a 3-shot kill. And if we've cast it even more times and we get it up to an 11/11, well, that's a 2-shot kill, so have fun. And then Guildmage's Forum has pay 1 and tap to add 1 mana of any color. If this mana is spent on a multicolored creature spell, that creature enters the battlefield additional +1 counter on it. Next up, we've got other ways to get counters on our commander with Hall of Oracles and Cave of Temptation. Each of these can filter our mana, and Hall of Oracles has tap with a +1 counter on target creature, activate only as a sorcery, and only if you've cast an instant sorcery spell this turn. Again, we don't have many instant sorceries in this deck, but we do have those MDFCs that can help us meet that requirement. And then by paying 4 and tapping and sacrificing Cave of Temptation, we can get 2 +1 counters on our commander. And finally, when it comes to lands that can really help us fix our mana, we've got Mirrodin's Core and Crumbling Vestige. Mirrodin's Core has tap put a charge counter on it, and we can tap to remove a charge counter from it to add 1 mana of any color. And then Crumbling Vestige is going to come into play tapped. It can just tap for a colorless, but when it enters the battlefield, we add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool. So if we're just starting things off and we're short on 1 color for our commander, this can help us get it out the first time. But to be completely honest, it's really not going to be that hard for us to fix our mana to be able to cast our commander and basically whatever we want from those MDFCs too. Because we're also going to be running 9 of the Tri-lands. We would have been running 10, but one of them is actually out of budget consideration. So we've got Arcane Sanctum, Crumbling Necropolis, Seaside Citadel, Frontier Bivouac, Mystic Monastery, Nomad Outpost, Opulent Palace, Sandstep Citadel, and Jungle Shrine. And they're called Tri-lands because they each enter the battlefield tapped and tapped to add 1 mana of 3 colors. So yeah, these can really help us fix our mana in a lot of situations. And speaking of fixing our mana, we're also going to be running for the Vivid lands. Again, we would have been running 5, but 1 is out of budget considerations. So Vivid Meadow, Crag, Creek, and Grove each enter the battlefield tap with 2 charge counters on them. They're each going to tap for 1 color, or we can tap to remove a charge counter from them to add 1 mana of any color. So yeah, they can essentially help us perfectly fix our mana twice, and yeah, by the time we've cast our commander twice, we're easily going to have Wooburg for it the next time. Next up, we also have some versatile fetch lanes with the Panoramas. And again, usually there are 5, but running 4 because 1 is out of budget. Regardless, each of these Panoramas tap for a colorless, and by paying 1 and tapping and sacrificing them, we can get 1 of 3 basic lands. Next up, we even have some ramp lands that can help us out with Mirrored Landscape, Crows and Verge, and Blighted Woodland. Mirrored Landscape's going to come into play tapped. It can tap for a colorless, and by paying 2 and tapping and sacrificing it, we can go get 2 basic lands that share land type and put them into play tapped. Crows and Verge is a bit more specific. It does basically the exact same thing, but we're going to go get a forest and a plains. And then Blighted Woodland has pay 3 and a green and tap and sacrifice it to get up to 2 basic land cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped. So again, no restriction on what lands those are. Speaking of which, there's Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse, and Warp Landscape. Both Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse are the exact same thing. We can tap and sacrifice them to get a basic land and play tapped. And Warp Landscape again does the exact same thing, but we have to pay 2 to tap and sacrifice it to do so. But now let's move on to our final land category and talk about some utility lands that can help us out as well. First up, we've got Miko Koro, Center of the Sea, which has pay 2 and tap. Each player draws a card. And then Gyreach Sanitarium is very similar, but it's going to make everyone loot. Next up, there's Arch Vraska, which likes to keep the card drawing to just ourselves. By paying 5 and tapping it, we draw a card, but we can only activate if we've got this city's blessing. And speaking of keeping to ourselves, there's Desolate Lighthouse, which has pay 1 blue, red, tap, draw a card, then discard a card. Next up, we've got Mystifying Maze and Labyrinth of Scophos, which are very similar. Mystifying Maze has pay 4 and tap, exile target attacking creature and opponent controls. At the beginning of the next end step, return to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. And then Labyrinth of Scophos has pay 4 and tap, remove target attacking or blocking creature from combat. So essentially, these can help protect us from our opponent's creatures when they're attacking. And then we've got Cathedral of War, which enters the battlefield tapped and has Exalted, so whenever a creature we control attacks alone, that creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So again, like I've mentioned many times before, just even by making our commander into a 7/7, that can make a big difference. And we can also help our commander or our other creatures get damage through with Rogue's Passage. It has pay 4 and tap, target creature can't be blocked this turn. And we can make a creature hit even harder with Sunhome, Fortress of the Legion. By paying 2 red, white, and tapping it, target creature gains double strike until end of turn. We can also pump up a creature though with Slayer's Stronghold, which has pay red and white and tap, target creature gets +2/+0 and gains vigilance and haste until end of turn. And then Skarg the Rage Pits has pay red, green, and tap it, target creature gets +1/+1 and gains trample until end of turn. Next up, there's Stenzia Bloodhall, which helps out in a different way. By paying 3 black, red, and tapping it's going to ping a player for 2. Again, although all these lands that we've gone through in this section just have for a colorless, that's completely fine because we've got plenty of other ways to fix our mana. So we're also going to be running Temple of the False God, which has tap for colorless, activate only if you've got 5 or more lands. And again, since we've got 99 lands in this deck, we are guaranteed to meet that requirement when we want to get this out. And of course, to round up the deck, we're going to be running 10 basic lands, 2 of each of these with a plains, mountain, island, forest, and swamp. But now that we've gone through every single card in this deck, let's talk about the price. Again, like I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, every single card in this deck outside of the commander is less than $1. So even with Child of Alara coming in at $6.54, the entire cost of the deck is estimated at $40.26. And also keep in mind that this cost actually includes the cost of basic lands, so if you already have those, you're going to have some extra savings there too. On top of that, you can get some extra savings if you buy heavily played and damage cards on TCG Player, and those cards obviously need a home as well. But also do keep in mind that this cost does not include the cost of shipping, which might vary depending upon where you live. And with that, this show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.